Ever wondered why your gut instinct picks up on someone's attraction long before your logical mind catches on? Picture this scenario. You're sitting in a coffee shop, having what seems like an ordinary conversation with a coworker about everyday topics, yet something feels different in the air. His gaze lingers just a fraction too long on your lips. His posture shifts almost imperceptibly, and suddenly you sense this electric tension surrounding you both. Sigmund Freud, the founding father of psychoanalysis, recognized over a century ago that our subconscious mind never lies to us. While we consciously follow social etiquette and cultural norms, our deeper self continuously broadcasts signals that expose our genuine intentions and hidden desires. These 7 silent messages from the unconscious are so powerful they can penetrate even the most sophisticated social masks. If you want to keep exploring the mysteries of human behavior, make sure to subscribe to this channel, because what you discover today might forever change how you understand interpersonal relationships. The first and perhaps most telling of all these signals manifests through what Freud termed unconscious identification. He begins mirroring your movements without any awareness of doing so. Picture yourself leaning slightly to the left during conversation and noticing how he automatically makes the same adjustment. You cross your arms and he follows suit within seconds. You speak more slowly and thoughtfully, and his vocal rhythm adapts to match yours. This mirroring happens completely outside conscious control and represents one of the strongest indicators that you've reached his deepest psychological layers. Freud had already recognized in the early 20th century that we only identify with individuals whom our unconscious considers deeply significant. When a man desires a woman, his instinctive and primitive psyche activates an ancient mechanism. He unconsciously attempts to establish profound connection by imitating her gestures, postures, and even vocal patterns. This occurs because the unconscious seeks harmony and symbolic fusion. Particularly revealing is when he copies your specific hand movements or adopts your unique way of laughing. Perhaps you notice he suddenly gesticulates similarly to you, or that his laughter takes on the same rhythm as yours. Freud called this phenomenon libidinal projection, the unconscious transfer of sexual energy onto a desired object. The man literally projects himself into you to establish a deeper, almost symbiotic connection. Pay attention to the more subtle forms of mirroring as well. Does he suddenly adopt expressions you frequently use? Does he change his posture to resemble yours? Does he adjust his speaking pace to match yours? This imitation isn't a conscious attempt at flirting, it's much more deeply rooted. It's the sign of an unconscious, desperately craving union. The fascinating aspect is that he himself remains unaware of what's happening. His conscious attention focuses on the conversation, the content, and social conventions, but his unconscious is completely focused on you, attempting to build an invisible bridge through imitation. Freud described this as one of the most primitive yet simultaneously most honest forms of human attraction. This mirroring can manifest at various intensity levels. Sometimes it's so subtle that only a trained eye would notice it, a slight adjustment in sitting position, a similar facial expression. Other times, it's so obvious that even strangers would pick up on it. The intensity of the mirroring often corresponds to the strength of his unconscious attraction toward you. If you consciously notice this mirroring, you're already in a position of tremendous psychological power. His unconscious has recognized you as a primary object of desire and is desperately seeking to draw closer to you. You've established an invisible connection with his deepest self, a connection he hasn't even rationally understood yet. It becomes particularly interesting when you consciously experiment. Change your posture and observe if he follows. Vary your speaking pace or use new expressions. A man who unconsciously mirrors you will reflect these changes like an echo. Have you ever noticed this pattern in yourself when you found someone attractive? Have you felt how your body automatically imitated the movements of someone who fascinated you? But even more revealing than his body language are the signals he can never consciously control. And the second signal is literally hidden in his eyes, in a part of his body directly connected to his autonomic nervous system. The second signal literally lies in his eyes and is the most honest of all because he can never consciously control it. Imagine noticing during conversation that his pupils suddenly become noticeably larger, even though the lighting conditions haven't changed. His eyes appear darker, more intense, almost hypnotic. This phenomenon isn't random. It's a direct message from his autonomic nervous system, revealing his deepest desires without any filters. Freud had already recognized in his early studies of the unconscious that the id, our most primitive and instinctive psychological component, exerts direct and uncontrollable power over our physical reactions. When a man desires a woman, his unconscious sends immediate signals to the sympathetic nervous system. The pupils dilate automatically to literally absorb more of what the id classifies as extraordinarily desirable. It's as if his body is saying, "I want to see more of you. I want to completely absorb you into myself." This pupil dilation is evolutionarily deeply rooted and closely linked to sexual arousal and emotional intensity. The unconscious prepares the entire body for intimacy, even while the conscious mind still acts politely, reservedly, and in accordance with social norms. Freud called this somatic manifestation of libido, the immediate physical expression of our instinctive sexual energy that bypasses all rational barriers. Particularly revealing is when this dramatic pupil dilation occurs while he's looking directly and intensely at you, or listening carefully when you speak. His body reacts to your mere presence with an archaic, completely uncontrollable response. The id in that moment has taken complete control and shows, without concealment, "You excite me at a fundamental and primitive level." Pay attention also to how the quality of his gaze changes. A man who desires you won't just have dilated pupils, but will also look longer than socially appropriate into your eyes. Freud described this as libidinal fixation. The unconscious literally cannot detach itself from what it has recognized as an object of maximum desire. His eyes become a direct and unfiltered channel between his deepest id and your being. The fascination lies in the combination of various eye signals, dilated pupils, plus prolonged and intense eye contact, plus a certain magnetic intensity throughout his entire facial expression. These three elements together form what Freud called ocular libidinal transference, the unconscious transfer and projection of sexual energy through direct gaze. If you consciously perceive this signal, you know with absolute certainty that you don't just have his superficial and conscious attention, but that his deepest self is already reacting to you at a primitive and instinctive level. His pupils never lie. They are the most honest and reliable barometer of his inner arousal and fascination, often still unconscious. Particularly powerful and clear, this signal becomes when it presents in combination with other subtle physical reactions. Slightly flushed cheeks, changed and faster breathing, or a barely perceptible tremor in his voice. All of these are unmistakable signs of an unconscious beginning to lose rational control. Have you ever consciously noticed how your own pupils behave and change when you find someone extraordinarily attractive and fascinating? But while his eyes reveal his deepest desire and fascination without censorship, there's an even more subtle yet equally revealing signal, one that shows itself in how he instinctively treats the physical space between you two. The third signal manifests in how he unconsciously and systematically reduces the physical space between you both, and is one of the oldest and most powerful signals of human attraction. Imagine noticing that during your conversation, he continuously and almost imperceptibly draws closer. Not in an invasive or obvious way, but so subtly and skillfully that you only become consciously aware of it after some time. He leans slightly forward when speaking, His feet point directly toward you, and the distance between you becomes constantly but inexorably smaller. His entire body seemed drawn to yours, like by an invisible magnetic field. Freud recognized in his revolutionary studies of the human psyche that our need for space and our territorial behavior are directly and immediately connected to our deepest and most primitive instincts. The id, our most archaic psychological system, knows no social conventions, courtesy rules, or cultural limitations. It wants only one thing: maximum closeness to what it has recognized as an object of maximum desire. When a man desires a woman at a deep and unconscious level, his id begins a subtle but systematic campaign to conquer personal space. This happens completely automatically, instinctively, and outside his rational and conscious control. It's an archaic program deeply rooted in our evolutionary heritage. This spatial approach is a direct and pure expression of what Freud called libidinal space occupation. The unconscious treats the physical space around the desired person as erotic territory to be conquered. Each centimeter less of distance is a small but significant victory of the instinctive id over rigid social norms and conventions. Particularly revealing and clear is when he positions his entire body to create a sort of intimate space or private area between you. He turns completely and exclusively toward you. He shields you with his conscious or unconscious posture from other people, as if instinctively creating a private and intimate zone. Freud called this territorial libido, the deep and primitive need to have and keep the desired person in his psychological and physical territory. Pay particular attention to how he reacts to your spatial signals. If you step back, he often approaches again, unconsciously and automatically. If you move away or distance yourself from him, he turns like a compass to maintain the energetic connection. His body follows an invisible but powerful magnetic field that your unconscious continuously radiates. The absolutely fascinating aspect is that this spatial approach often happens in characteristic waves. He approaches, becomes unconsciously aware of it, and instinctively retreats slightly, only to then approach again, almost compulsively. This rhythmic oscillation between closeness and distance is a classic and unmistakable expression of the internal psychological conflict between his instinctive id and his controlling superego. Particularly powerful and convincing, this signal becomes in public and social spaces. While he maintains a completely normal and socially appropriate distance with other people, this automatically and continuously reduces with you. His body unconsciously but clearly signals, "You are different, you are extraordinary, you deserve my most intimate closeness." Have you ever consciously felt how your body moves automatically and as if by itself closer to someone you find deeply attractive and fascinating? But even more direct and revealing than his body language is a signal you cannot see, but can clearly hear. His voice changes in a characteristic way that he can never consciously and voluntarily control. The fourth signal you cannot see, but you can clearly hear it. His voice transforms in your presence in a characteristic way that reveals his deepest desire without any mask. Imagine noticing that his voice suddenly becomes noticeably deeper and more velvety when he speaks with you. His speaking speed clearly slows down. His words are chosen more carefully and thoughtfully, and sometimes he literally seems to purr or savor certain words and syllables. This dramatic vocal transformation isn't a conscious and calculated attempt to impress, it's the direct and unfiltered manifestation of his awakened and intense desire. Freud recognized in his pioneering psychoanalytic studies that the human voice is one of the most intimate and honest expressive channels of the unconscious. When a man desires a woman at a fundamental level, his primitive id automatically and uncontrollably activates the deepest and most resonant registers of his voice. This happens instinctively, because the unconscious knows at an archaic level that deeper and fuller tones signal strength, dominance, sexual masculinity, and emotional maturity. His vocal cords literally become highly sensitive instruments of unconscious seduction. This fascinating vocal transformation shows itself in various characteristic nuances and gradations. His tonal pitch drops noticeably and dramatically, especially when pronouncing your name or addressing personal and intimate topics. Freud called this vocal regression. The unconscious automatically resorts to primitive and archaic forms of communication that speak directly and without filters to the limbic system and create emotional resonance. Particularly revealing and clear is when he lingers noticeably longer on certain emotionally charged words. They almost seem to savor and sensually enjoy them. Words like beautiful, fascinating, interesting, or especially your name become small but powerful acoustic declarations of love. The id uses the voice as a direct and unfiltered channel for the transfer and projection of libidinal energy. Also pay particular attention to the characteristic pauses between his words and sentences. A man who desires you at a deep level will more often make small, significant pauses, not from insecurity or lack of self-confidence, but because his unconscious wants to literally savor and maximize every precious moment of your undivided attention. These pauses are literally filled with unspoken tension, electric energy, and pure desire. The absolutely fascinating aspect is that this vocal change is often accompanied by a noticeable increase in articulation and precision. He doesn't just speak deeper and slower, but also more clearly, precisely, and consciously, as if literally every single word were a precious and personal gift to you. Freud described this appropriately as libidinal perfection. The unconscious instinctively seeks to present only the best, most beautiful, and most complete to the desired person. Particularly powerful and convincing, this vocal signal becomes in personal, emotional, or intimate conversation topics. His voice doesn't just become noticeably deeper, but at the same time also warmer, more inviting, and more enveloping. It's as if he's directly inviting you into his most intimate and vulnerable psychological world through his transformed voice. When you talk on the phone, this signal becomes even more clearly and concentratedly perceptible. Without the distraction of visual stimuli, his entire unconscious concentrates completely and exclusively on the vocal and acoustic connection with you. His voice becomes his primary and most powerful instrument of seduction. Have you ever consciously noticed how your voice changes characteristically when you speak with someone you find extraordinarily attractive and desirable? But there's an even more direct and unmistakable signal than the voice, one that involves the highly sensitive sense of touch and practically eliminates all remaining doubts. The fifth signal is the most direct and unmistakable of all. He constantly finds new creative reasons to touch you, apparently casually and innocently, yet his unconscious follows a clear and systematic plan of gradual physical approach. Imagine noticing that he continually touches your arm gently when he laughs warmly, places his warm hand briefly and apparently casually on your shoulder when he passes by you, or his fingers brush as if by chance against yours when he passes or gives you something. These subtle touches seem completely spontaneous, natural, and innocent, but in reality, they follow an ancient pattern deeply rooted in human attraction that is firmly anchored in our collective unconscious. Freud recognized in his revolutionary research on human sexuality that physical touch represents the most primitive, direct, and honest form of libidinal communication between people. When a man desires a woman at a fundamental and existential level, his instinctive id pushes with almost irresistible force toward physical connection and bodily contact. These seemingly casual and innocent touches are actually carefully orchestrated and unconscious attempts by his deepest self to create an intimate and electric bridge between his body and yours. These characteristic touches have a very special and unmistakable quality. They always last clearly, a bit longer than would be socially necessary or appropriate. A simple greeting handshake becomes a gentle and warm holding and enveloping. A normal greeting hug extends for precious and meaningful seconds. Freud called this appropriately tactile overinvestment. The unconscious charges every single touch with excess and concentrated libidinal energy. Particularly revealing and clear is the special way he touches you. His hands are noticeably gentler, more tender, and more attentive compared to other people in his environment. His fingers literally linger on your skin, as if they were drawing an invisible and intimate map of desire and longing. Every single touch is a small but powerful declaration of love from his body to yours. Pay particular attention to exactly where he touches you. Arms and shoulders are socially acceptable and safe zones, but a man who desires you at a deep level will also subtly test and explore more intimate and sensitive areas. A warm hand on your lower back when you walk together. A finger that casually brushes your neck or cheek when admiring your hair. His unconscious systematically and methodically maps the boundaries and possibilities of your physical intimacy. The absolutely fascinating aspect is that these meaningful touches are almost always accompanied by a special changed intensity throughout his entire behavior. In the magical moment when his skin touches yours, his entire attention shifts dramatically. His eyes become more focused and intense, his breathing changes noticeably, sometimes even his pulse. It's as if an invisible but powerful electric connection is created between you. Freud described this scientifically as somatic transference, the direct transfer of psychological and emotional energy through immediate physical contact. In the precious moment of touch, all his libido flows directly and without filters toward you. His body desperately and instinctively seeks this sacred connection because the unconscious knows at an archaic level that touch is the most direct and honest path toward the desired fusion. Particularly powerful and convincing, this signal becomes when he actively seeks plausible reasons and occasions to touch you. He gallantly helps you remove your coat, adjusts a completely invisible eyelash from your cheek, or gently touches your arm to attract your undivided attention. Have you ever consciously felt how your hands seek, as if by themselves, the touch with someone who fascinates and electrifies you deeply? But the final and perhaps most convincing signal doesn't reside in what he does, but in what he remembers and reveals an obsession that goes deeper than any conscious control. The sixth and final signal is the most subtle, but at the same time the most absolutely convincing and clear. He remembers with photographic precision details about you that even you have long forgotten, and this reveals a deep, unconscious obsession that goes well beyond simple courtesy or social interest. Imagine that he mentions completely in passing, and apparently secondary, your very specific favorite coffee that you mentioned only once weeks ago, easily remembers the unusual name of your pet, or literally quotes a phrase you said in a completely secondary conversation. Perhaps he even mentions the color of the dress you wore at your second meeting, or a small gesture you made. This extraordinary, almost disturbing memory capacity isn't absolutely random. It's the direct result of an unconscious fixation and fascination that Freud appropriately called libidinal hypervigilance. Freud recognized in his deep analyses of the human psyche that our complex unconscious functions like a highly selective emotional memory. Information about people we desire at a fundamental level and who have awakened our deepest interest is automatically charged with special intense psychological energy and thus made practically unforgettable. When a man truly desires a woman, literally every small detail about her becomes a precious mental treasure that his obsessive unconscious systematically collects, catalogues, and preserves for eternity. This extraordinary exaggerated memory capacity manifests in various characteristic forms and expressions. He easily knows which specific color you wore at the last meeting, remembers crystal clearly emotional stories from your childhood that you told only once and completely in passing, or can repeat a precise quote from you even months later. His entire brain treats every minuscule piece of information about you as existentially important and vital for survival. Particularly revealing and significant is when he remembers not just bare facts, but the subtle emotional nuances and moods of your common conversations, not just what you said, but also the special way you said something, your mood then, or subtle changes in your behavior and body language. Freud called this scientifically effective memorization the unconscious archives, and preserves not just pure information, but also the complex emotional vibrations and energetic resonances that are inseparably connected to them. This extraordinary heightened attention to the smallest details also shows itself clearly in how he immediately reacts even to the smallest changes in you. A subtle new hairstyle, a different and unusual lipstick, even a changed mood or new body posture, he notices and registers everything immediately and comments on it attentively. His finely calibrated unconscious functions like a highly sensitive and precise instrument that is permanently tuned to your every nuance and vibration. The absolutely fascinating aspect is that he's often himself surprised and amazed by his unusual memory capacity. If you confront him directly about this, he might react with embarrassment, amazement, or even slight shame, because he hasn't consciously realized how intensely and obsessively he studies and observes you. His unconscious works continuously like an invisible but highly efficient archivist who systematically catalogues every small aspect of your fascinating personality. Freud described this phenomenon scientifically as objectual overinvestment, the psychological overcharging of a love object with concentrated emotional energy. You're no longer just a normal person to him, but a fascinating and complex enigma that his unconscious absolutely wants to understand and completely fathom. Have you ever noticed how perfectly you manage to remember the smallest details of someone who had deeply moved and electrified your heart? These 6 powerful signals bring us to a fundamental truth about the human condition. Sigmund Freud taught us revolutionary knowledge. True human communication doesn't happen primarily through consciously chosen words, but through the silent and honest languages of the body, eyes, voice, and uncensored memory. These archaic signals are more authentic than any spoken word, truer than any conscious confession, and more honest than any rational explanation. The unconscious knows no lies, masks, or social conventions. It knows only pure, unfiltered truth. If you recognize these 6 signals in a man, then you know with scientific certainty you haven't just conquered his superficial attention, but you've reached his deepest self. What hidden truth within your innermost being could fundamentally change your life and relationships if you finally recognized and completely understood it? Which city are you watching from? Write it in the comments. I'm really curious about our international community of psychology enthusiasts. If this video gave you valuable new insights into the human psyche, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more fascinating psychological discoveries.